listening to Out Late with David. True stories of coming out later in life. And now here's your host, David Cotton.
Joining me today is a man who came out at 55 after marriages to 2 women and raising 2 children. He's been with his husband now for 20 years. He's also an author of a memoir where he tells the story of living 2 floors above a family business, a funeral home, where he lived amongst the stacked caskets. Joining me today from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Kevin O'Connor. I'm glad to be here with you today. Thank you for taking the time. So you came out 20 years ago, but I want to jump back before that point in time when you came out, when you're younger, what your thoughts were as a kid growing up and what that was like. Did you ever feel like you weren't straight or that you were different?
I talk about that a little bit in both books that I've got. I wrote 2 Floors Above Grief, which is there. And I told you about the other book, Journey Out, which is stories of men who have come out of marriages. And in both those books, I talk a little bit about what it was like as a kid and just always wanting to feel accepted and not ever sure if I was. And as a young kid that, in a parochial school setting with this, a circle of friends, that had to do with sports and what you did in sports and how you connected with sports. And so at a 11 or 12-year-old year of age, I felt I wasn't connecting with, and we only had a class of 24 kids, so we're not talking huge numbers here.
Okay.
But the idea that I wasn't feeling connected with the people who played sports, and I thought that was my entry to be accepted. I really hadn't tied that together with being gay or having an attraction yet at that point, but it certainly felt on the outside, and feelings that I had as I got older, that the ideas of being accepted. So that was my first foray, I guess, into thinking I'm different. There's something about me that's not the same as the others. And how do I do to put that together? So that's where it started, I guess, right there. And as I read, at 11, 12, 13, 14, that's when a lot of people that are going back and looking at their history and their attractions start, puberty, a lot of stuff happens there. So that was for me, my first indication. And then it just progressed from there. But that was where I first experienced something about me that was different and my struggles with dribbling a basketball and being accepted by the team and working very hard to get the most improved player award, and that I got that level of acceptance that I was looking for. It was still, probably even with that, I still knew that I was hiding stuff too. So,
Did you know what you were hiding or a sense of what you're hiding?
Good question, David. I probably didn't at the time. I probably had inklings that I was attracted to some of the kids I was hanging out with, boys, but thought, well, no, I can't do that. What's that all about? I know as I would go to bookstores as a teenager, even into high school, and if I was taking that trip by myself, you didn't really find these books in the bookstores in my town of Elgin. But if I was able to get into a bigger bookstore in the suburban malls or go to Chicago, I would gravitate to those areas where I could read and sit on the floor and read about. That's when I started to attach the word gay, almost sexual. Then I don't even think we're calling it gay that much in the 60s, there, early 60s. But just the idea that I was starting to, hey, I think I'm connecting with this. But I remember buying. I didn't finish reading the book or what I wanted to read. So I remember I have about an hour ride in the train. And so I remember taking that book. I must have been 13 or 14. And my parents allowed us to go into the city at that time on our own. But when I got off the train, I didn't dare bring that book home. I just threw it I threw it in a waste can. I felt, oh, this is the way I'm going to be found out. I got as far as I could in the book and then I just put it away. So that was another teenage experience that I had, and I did all the things in high school about dating and mixed crowds and was very accepted among my peers and had a lot of leadership opportunities and things like that. So, which kept me connected at the high school setting. And And then I was in college when, about springtime of college, freshman year, there was a roommate change, and one of my friends moved in with me, and we hit it. Well, we'd become good friends, but then by the last 2 months of that school year, we were sharing more than just friendship and learning a lot about sexual connections and things. But to the point when I went home, I was terrified. I was terrified of this because I knew I liked it. I knew I liked him. And we were set up to be roommates the following year. We'd already signed, it was done whatever we did to put roommate preferences together. And I couldn't tell anybody about this back home. I'm not really proud of this, but in the summer, I worked with the housing department to say that we weren't going to be roommates and we didn't want to be, but I never told him I did that. So it came to the first year of sophomore year, getting up in the dorms. He was expecting that we would be roommates. And that's when I told him that I had gone behind his back. I was afraid that all that allure, the attraction, I felt like I wouldn't be able to control it. And I was afraid. I was scared. I mean, we maintained a friendship through the rest of college, but that was my first intimate sexual encounter was when I was 19.
So this was in the early to mid 70s?
That would have been 1969.
Okay. So the DSM still had homosexuality at that time listed as a mental illness.
Yes, it did.
So that was a lot of pressure to...
Yeah, and the concept of whatever coming out meant at that time, I'm not even sure what terms we used, but it wasn't in my psyche or, gee, I've got to do this. I'm just going to pursue college life and date and have girlfriends and kept up with my social stuff. It was easy for me to be social, but I never really came to grips or really told very few, if any, about Chuck was my confidant because we had shared that experience together, but we didn't really share that experience with any of our friends. We had a lot of mutual friends, but we never shared that experience.
Is he still a friend today?
He's passed. So I haven't had any contact with him in probably 30 years. Anyway, he's passed. So my last contact with him, I met him for lunch one day downtown Chicago, was probably more than 30 years ago.
If I may ask, what path did he follow then when he left college or in college?
To the best of my knowledge, he partnered with somebody that we knew from school, stayed with him, I believe, but there was a partnership with him. And I'm not even sure when he died. I found out from his family about 25 years ago that he had passed away.
So after that experience, how did you then work through the rest of college when it came to relationships and your sexuality? Because you eventually ended up being married to a woman.
Yeah. Well, I took an approach of running away, burying it. I equate my being gay with this pit in my stomach. It was there for me to admit to myself that I was gay, but not to enter into any kind of pursuit with peers or anything like that. I had a great circle of friends when I was going to school in Chicago at Loyola. And among that circle of friends in Chicago was the person that became my first wife. And so I really buried being gay. It was a secret with me. It was a secret with me.
When did you unbury it?
I started to unbury it probably once I was married, and she was a very good friend. In fact, we reignited our friendship the last 15 years. We're very good friends. We were married for about 5 years. But in about the third year of that marriage, I was able to tell her, hey, what words I used, but I conveyed to her that I was attracted to men as well as to her. And so she had been having some success with therapy at the time. This was putting us in about 1977. She'd been happy with her therapist and the things that she was working on. And she said, why don't you go talk to so-and-so? So he led me to somebody else that I could talk to. And that's when so that was late 77, 78. That's when I first was able to talk to about this with somebody.
Hmm.
And she was aware. We didn't share much of what I talked about, but she was aware of one of the reasons why I was talking to him,
Hmm.
this counselor. We lasted in the marriage until 79. We went to joint counseling, and then it was just, I reached a point in time, I think I was I don't think, I know I was the one that said I can't go any farther. And
Hmm.
we had laid on the table not only issues of being gay, but just other things that had come up in our relationship, even though we'd been super, super friends. And then the marriage ended, and then we got divorced. And
How did she react when you told her, other than maybe you go see this counselor?
I'd call her supportive
Hmm.
and listening. I
Oh.
mean, she didn't say get out, or how could you do this, or how could you do this to us or to me. I don't remember anything like that. It was more compassionate,
Hmm.
more she wanted me to get whatever help that would help me, benefit me, to be able to talk to somebody about it.
So after you decided to end that marriage, now you're out and you're single again.
Mhm.
Did you see that you had other options in life with respect to romance, with a man versus a woman?
I was involved in different groups in the town where we lived. She had, when we decided to take up separate residences, she moved away from that town, and I stayed in the town we were living in, and had a whole social group that I involved with. I got involved with groups of people. I got involved with another woman for a while shortly after that. And then in the other circle of friends, professional circle of friends I had too as a teacher. And then I
Hmm.
met a person who became my second wife. And
So
that was,
why did you, because you said you met in a woman and then someone who became your second wife, but yet you're attracted to men and seeing a counselor. What pulled you back to the women again?
okay. Well, I think we can, as I repack things, we're now at about 1989,
Mm-hmm.
no, 79, 80. I had lived in we had lived in the San Francisco area and Oakland before we moved back to Illinois. At that time is when Harvey Milk was very politically
Mm-hmm.
active, very much in the news at the time. We had Anita Bryant in Florida doing her thing. We had Harvey and his group doing whatever they were doing in San Francisco. There was legislation in both Florida and California about banning gay teachers from the classrooms. There was legislation being proposed. I was a teacher in Illinois,
Mm.
taught elementary school.
Okay.
So, and loved my job, loved being in education and seeing what was happening in both those states. And we left California about 4 months before Harvey Milk was assassinated.
Mm.
So as I followed all that news story and was very interested in it and all the stuff that was happening, it just, I think, put me further and further into another corner of my closet and
Mm.
made that aspect of me being gay even further down in the pit in my stomach. And being a teacher, loving kids, wanting to be a dad, I just didn't see that I had any options at that
Mm.
time in a gay world. And living where I was in the far suburbs of Chicago, I'm sure as I look back now, I'm sure there are outlets there, but I was not exploring them. So
Mm.
I just threw myself or put myself into situations where I was having more friendships with guys, and if I was dating people, it was women. So it was
So,
just another way for me to escape who, even though I knew who I was, it was,
Mhm.
I could keep it buried, regrettably,
We are good
for
at that, aren't we?
yes,
Put
yes,
that down in there, put on the mask, be somebody
yes,
different, totally.
yeah. And I
Yeah.
was, just doing well in my profession. And in the midst of all that, I met one of the colleagues in the district I worked at, and then we got married.
As a life coach, I'm committed to help you discover the passions in your life and help you map a course to achieve the things you really want. Together, we will unwind those persistent self-doubts that are holding you back. You'll begin to see your passions more clearly and set achievable goals. Throughout your journey, I'll be there to challenge and encourage you in moving forward to discover your authentic self. For more information about my personal life coaching services or to arrange a complimentary consultation, visit davidcottoncoaching.com.
You're listening to Out Late with David.
So when you got married and now you're in this relationship, you had 2 children. So you get to realize the dream of being a father. Did that feel like a struggle during that time frame? Or were you able just to push that back and compartmentalize your thoughts?
Well, the compartment too came from discovering we were pregnant before we got married.
Okay.
And so my desire to be a father and her desire to be a mom, very strong. We got married and then announced the pregnancy, other than to our families, our parents. We announced the pregnancy to our friends a few months after we got married. So, and I just chose, I guess I chose this part of, I want to be a dad. I want to be a great father. I want to be a good teacher. I want to be a wonderful educator. I just didn't deal with being gay. Probably couldn't even say the word at the time. I just buried it. And it was just a big hole, or it wasn't a hole. It was like a tumor.
Yeah.
In my abdomen, that it was always there, and it would sit there for a while, and I wouldn't even think about it. I'd be busy changing diapers and being so involved in child development for my kids, but also with the kids I taught. I was just so enmeshed and grateful for being a dad and being in that atmosphere and having a relationship. And we spent the next 20 some years just being a married couple, a professional. She was professional educators and doing what we could to help with our incomes and keep the house going and keep the kids going. And the things that all parents, not all, but most parents do to create a family life. So we did that. But all this time, I still picture myself sometimes getting captured with that idea. Kevin, you know you're gay though, right? And then, okay, yeah, but you got to fix the bike. You got to mow the lawn. You're having people over for dinner. Or you got the family coming over for the holidays. It just, when I would get those perceptions of who else I was, I had to put them away. I had to put them away.
When did that pop through and actually break through the surface to say, I can't be put away anymore?
Well, the breaking point, the one that comes to mind most readily, is my younger son, when he was in high school and 16, 17. I remember coming across things on his computer that were gay oriented on his computer. And a couple things happened. As I came across this, I thought, gee, I am attracted to this stuff. Who you fooling? The other thing was knowing that what I had been feeling for all these years was happening to him. And so I was able to share that with my wife. I said, I noticed this was on his computer. And both of us being educators and things like that, I thought, well, what if that paranoia thing still, what if somebody was to find that these things were on our family computers? I need to talk to him about what's going on and where he's at. So, and we had a relationship that was probably typical, or for me, it was typical. Just the ebb and flow of a parent-teenage relationship.
Right.
And so I sat him down one day and I just said, I sat him down. I said, I've been seeing these things on the computer. And is there anything you want to tell me, or something you've got on your mind? Or I can't remember the line of questioning or dialogue. Of course, he probably was denying it and stuff. But I said, well, I did see these things on the computer. And I sense that maybe that's an attraction, or you wouldn't be having all those different sites if you weren't liking it. So that's about as far as that discussion went. But as I was having the discussion, I can remember sitting in the chair opposite, thinking to myself, hey, you're talking to him about this, and yet you haven't come to your own truth, your own authenticity. And here I am trying to help, assist a son and have a dialogue, but what about you? What have you been hiding all these years? So there was a part of me that didn't want him to have to live his life hiding that. And there was a part of me that said, I've got to do something about this. And I don't know if it was, I'd have, at this point in time, we had gone through family counseling with the boys since the time they were in elementary school, and conflicts and things like that. It might have been before this discussion or in the midst of this discussion with my son. I finally said, I got to get individual help with what's going on in my own head. So through our family counselor, I talked to him, and he said, well, since I'm seeing both you and your wife and your kids, I really can't, I'm not going to see you individually on this. So he referred me to somebody else, and she was a treasure. And so I spent quite a bit of time just unpacking this whole issue with her, and then the relationship and the kids and things like that. And it was with her help that I finally came to the decision that I needed to fully embrace who I was and come out and take the risk, take the chance, take whatever needs to be done. And in the midst of this is when my wife and I had been working on other issues, probably unrelated to me being gay, but just came to a decision to get divorced. But part of that process was coming out to her, and she came to the counseling sessions with that in mind, that I was gay and I was identifying as gay. And what could we do about this? And then, muddled with all the other family concerns we have, we proceeded to go with the divorce. I was just listening to the broadcast you had with the couple that decided to have a non-monogamous marriage, and that intrigued me. That was something that never entered our minds, or as we were going through this, it was just felt that we needed to, our best interest was to get divorced.
Let's jump back to the point in time when you decided you needed to come out.
Mm-hmm.
How did that feel, and how did that affect you in the way you presented yourself to the world and thought about yourself?
Wonderful question. Well, I was by this time I was a school principal, and in an area that was probably rather conservative.
A public school or
public school, and I had been very successful at it. I was in my 18th, 19th year of being a principal at two different buildings, and,
wow.
having some success with it. And I'd pursued different degrees and got all that. But with only a couple of years to go in my contract, I said, well, this is not the time to, as much as I wanted to be what I referred to as a soapbox gay and get up and, still having that image of Harvey Milk in my head, probably getting up and saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. And you're going to accept me no matter what. I'm going to be your principal. I'm going to be gay. And I even took to finding people in different, principal associations that were out and were gay. And I thought, nah, I've only got a couple of years to go here. I better just sit tight on this. And that's what I did. And so then, I retired in 2007. We got divorced in 2006. I found a new place to live for my last 12 to 18 months of my principal job. And so we were leaving separate lives. We hadn't had the discussion with the kids yet, who are now in their 20s, about what was going on, just that we had established separate households. But then sometimes there's a term in Yiddish literature called beshert. You familiar with that term? Beshert? Bashert.
No.
Okay, I'll tie this together. Beshert means meant to be. And so in the midst of what I was going through with counselors and making the decision to get divorced, trying to do what I could for my son, who was in his own process of coming out and was seeking addiction counseling and all that going on, I reacquainted myself with a college friend who wrote to me and said, and through our discussions, I learned he had been married and he came out. He had 2 adult children. And so he and I developed this communication through email. This was 2003, 2004. So in the midst of all this going on, I'm acquainting myself with him. And he's been able to say, well, this is, why don't you try this or do that? He was a great confidant counselor. And then here comes the Beshert part, the meant to be. He had a friend who had also gone through a similar situation. He called me one day, 2005. So I was working 2005. I had 2 more years left of my contract. he called me. He says, I've got a guy that I know who's been through our situation, and he's in Chicago. And I don't know, you seem a little unstable to me. And if you want to talk to him, I said, sure, I'd love to get some more ideas in my head and things. So he introduced we and this man, Leon, came to Chicago for a business meeting, and we talked on the phone for about 2 or 3 hours one night. And the next day we arranged to meet. And our friend, the mutual friend, had no intention of, he just wanted me to get some other voices and some other, he really wasn't intending to matchmake or to put us together. But that person, Leon, has been my husband for, he's been the one I met 20 years later. So
Oh my.
so that's where, when I say Brashert, there's a meant to be. There's a thing with timing there. If Jaime hadn't sent me a holiday card with, hey, write me, I haven't talked to you in 5 or 6 years, and those kind of things, there's something in the karma universe that played together in my situation
Yeah.
and made things happen. And so that happened in 2005. I met Leon after I had already had the conversation with my wife that we were going to split up. I had already moved to another part of the house. I was looking for other places to live. So that was all part of the early communication with Leon and me, was what I was going through, something that he had gone through 10 years prior with his wife and family. So we certainly communicated with that topic, but we just developed a very nice and wonderful friendship, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, it sounds beautiful. And talk
Yeah.
about the universe. They drop sometimes in your lap if you're aware and present to know when to take advantage of opportunity. It's amazing the opportunities that are out there
No,
that
and I
a
think
lot of times people just push away.
that's true. And when going back to one of your earlier prompts, when I decided, or when we decided to get divorced and for me to make changes in my living, and I had no idea what was going to happen. I didn't have any person in mind. I didn't have a thing that I was going to do. Now that I'm out to my wife and I'm making this declaration to our counselor, and we're going to I'd already been seeing an attorney by that point. I wasn't thinking, okay, I'm going to get involved with a guy. I'm going to get involved. I'm going to find my everlasting love. That never occurred to me in those first. Then lo and behold, 3 or 4 months into the midst of this is when Leon entered my life, and
It's beautiful.
yeah.
A lot of guys that come out later too. That's one of the focuses I've seen in the stories, is the desire to find that partner or that person in their life to be with them. And many don't. And then they get a bit disgruntled and sad and depressed. And I just, I said, just stay the true course, stay yourself, just be present. Don't get hung up on the apps on your phone either. Go meet people for real, face to face, get to know them just like you do when you make a friend, because it's got to start as friendship first.
Yeah.
Before you can have, at least in my opinion, before you start anything deeper than it.
Oh, yeah. And that's really what it was like for Leon and I. I mean, it was a distance relationship, but we, shortly after we met, in that summer of 20 years ago, of 2005, we were on the phone together every night, just telling each other about our days and where we were at, and arranging times to get together if we could and things like that. So
are you together in the same space now?
Oh, yeah. We've lived together since I retired from my principal job career in 2007. A week after we'd already made these plans, but a week after I retired, I moved to Florida and we moved in together, and we've been together ever since.
Wow, fantastic. Congratulations.
20 years as a couple. We've been living together for 18 years. We got married in 2015. It's been great. And we've been able to, for the most part, maintain relationships with our families and stuff.
So how did the family and friends react when you did come out publicly and expressed who you truly are?
Sure. Well, the first person that I came out to was my mom in 2005. I just met with her and said, hey, Gotta tell you something. And I told her first that we were getting divorced. And then I just said, we were watching a Cubs game at the time at her house. I said, there's something else I want to tell you. And she said, okay, you mind if I get a beer? I said, I don't mind. Bring me one too. And then I told her that I was gay. There was a pause there, I think. She went back to some of my grade school friendships and said, does this have anything to do with so-and-so? And she'd mention a name, or I said, no, not really. No. And then at that time, I didn't know about Leon. This is before I met Leon. So I was able to talk to her about that. And then at that point, she said, well, let's go get some dinner. I'm hungry. So we went to a restaurant in town and talked a little bit. And then we talked more about, okay, what do we do with this information? And she was, as a mom would be, she was, what are you going to do about your job? And what are you going to do? And I said, well, what are you going to do about your brothers? So she said to me, why don't we just, you're not even divorced yet. This is going to take a while to get divorced. Maybe you and I will keep this a secret, or you and I can just talk about it, but we won't let your brothers know until the divorce. When the divorce happens, then through that conversation, that's pretty much what I did. Actually, I found out later that my mother wasn't as secretive as I thought she was. And, had told a friend of hers who communicated this to my sister-in-law. And so when I had my big coming out, my conversations with my brothers after the divorce was final in the summer of 2006, I realized that they knew anyway, and they were keeping their own secrets. So right now I can look back and laugh at it. It wasn't as easy to laugh about it at the time. It didn't take me long to laugh about it, but so that was how I first started talking about it. And then I had one confidant, a teacher who I worked with in the school, and I was able to talk to her. That helped a little bit. I wasn't, and I really didn't let anybody know in an out way. I'm changing my terminology from coming out to going to instead. And so I didn't let anybody know in my professional settings what had happened until after I had my formal retirement. I had moved to Florida. And then a lot of us in my professional setting were still very communicative, and some of us still are. But it's then when I started to talk about Leon and who I was and what's happened and things like that. It was sort of one onion skin at a time coming off the onion.
That is, you're letting people in. So letting in instead of coming out.
There you go, letting in.
You're so important to me. I'm letting you into my life because I want you to know. Others don't need to. It's not their business. But for you, I want you to know. So I'm letting you in. So what did you learn, and what's the takeaway from this whole life process to where you are today?
Let me take a breath there. Well, part of it is I'm thinking of my son who has his own same-sex relationships in his life now. Is happy and content. Yeah, the younger one. But I'm thinking one of the things I process sometimes about in reference to your question is I wouldn't want this to be any different because I maybe wouldn't have had the chance to be a dad. Of course, things have changed so much in this world of gay couples and gay parents and things like that. Things that weren't that happening that much 20 years ago and weren't happening much 30 years ago. I felt that at that time, my only way to become a parent was to be in a straight heterosexual relationship. So as I look back, what have I learned? I've learned that I'll go back to the word bashert. There was a power taking care of all this. There was something guiding me. I look back too and think, all right, sometimes I wrestle with myself. What if I had come out clearly and authentically after my first marriage, 1980? If I had done that, I probably wouldn't be looking at the AIDS quilt. My name might be on it instead. So when I think of it that way and about something, a power guiding things, there's a reason, there's a purpose I'm still here. There's a reason that in the last 10 years of my career, after I was a principal, I ended up in a department in Broward Schools where I was on the team that was the advocates for LGBT families. Wrote curriculum for sexual health, trained teachers how to talk to kids about what do you do with a kid who's coming out? What do you do? So if I had come out earlier, I wouldn't have had those opportunities. So there's something as I look back and think, no, I wouldn't have done anything differently because this is what life has brought to me. I wouldn't have had some of the experiences I had if I had rearranged the sequence of my life, I think. And I've been happy with the sequence of my life. Was it easy? No. Oh, was marriage easy? No, the marriages weren't easy. Especially as I let the gay part come out in those marriages. That was very challenging and painful. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to have this time with my son, who coming out, and I'd like to think that I've been a help to him. So that's pretty much how I look at my 75 years.
What I heard is the takeaway is live life fully, acknowledging who you are, seeing the opportunities, and taking advantage of them to where it's for, in the end, the betterment of others. Like the work you did as a post-principal educator. I mean, I'm just seeing those families. That brings me to tears, the kids and the families of how to deal with the youth and coming out. And then that also takes me to current events today and wonder how much of that's still in place as we go forward. But things are cyclical, so at least people have been touched. So I thank you for touching those families and putting your experience to a positive. I want to thank you for sharing your story today. As we say each time when a guest uncovers their soul for the world to hear, is we know it will touch someone somewhere, and it will be a comfort and help to them on their journey. So thank you for being so vulnerable today and sharing your journey to today.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity, and it just it lifts me up. So it's just not that I was down that much, but it lifts me up, and I'm grateful for the opportunities I have to share this story.
Thank you again. And that's all for this episode of Out Late with David. Until next time.
To hear more episodes, visit outlatewithdavid.com. And to learn more about personal life coaching services, go to davidcottoncoaching.com.